reach for the universe.
The Rebel Moon popcorn actually wasn't that bad. Rebel Moon Part 1, A Child of Fire, just came out today on Netflix, and I just watched it, and I'm so excited to discuss it with you guys. I was really looking forward to Rebel Moon. I actually look forward to practically every new Zack Snyder movie, because I personally love his visual flair. Does it match everything? No, but when I want to watch a Zack Snyder movie, nothing else is going to satisfy that craving, that want. And after finishing Rebel Moon just now, I feel the same way about it that I feel about practically every single other Zack Snyder movie, and that's that it's incredibly flawed, but at the same time, it's incredibly fun. But anyway, I'm gonna dive into my review. This is going to be a spoiler-free review. When I talk about the plot, it's gonna be very minimal. But before I do that, you should consider subscribing. I do movie reviews, I do TV show reviews, I do trailer reactions, and I talk about video games. Normally in these reviews, I like to break it up into pros and cons, but in this review, I have to do pro, con, because with every good thing about this film, there's kind of a bad thing about it, but with every bad thing, there's also a silver lining. The first being the plot itself. Again, I'm not going to spoil it. I'm not going to get too in-depth. I'm just going to tell you the gist of what this film is about. And it's basically about a small space village, and space Nazis show up because in big sci-fi epic operas, it's always space Nazis. But they show up and they basically demand the vast majority of their harvest. So two members of this community set off on an adventure across the solar system, basically trying to recruit people to help them fight against the space Nazis. And that's what the plot is in a very small nutshell, but obviously there's more to it than that. But this plot is very run-of-the-mill. It's very cliche. It's very generic. If you've consumed any other epic sci-fi fantasy space opera, whether it be Star Wars or another movie franchise or a novel series or a video game franchise, this film doesn't really do anything new in terms of the plot. And with the characters, most of the characters feel like you've seen a version of them before somewhere else and done probably better than they're done here. The main character has a mysterious past, and they have ties and connections to the royal family and to a war that happened before the events of the first installment. There's an untrustworthy bar guy who joins in on the adventure after a promise of coin. There's a former military leader who's now a drunk gladiator. My point is, Rebel Moon, again, doesn't really have much of a unique foundation or a unique bone in its body anywhere, except for the direction style. Except for the fact that this is Zack Snyder's version of this sort of project. And he has this way of making the most flawed scripts fun. And that's honestly the biggest praise that I can give Rebel Moon, and it's my biggest positive takeaway, is that this is just another Zack Snyder film. His visual style is like eye candy for me personally, and it's very easy to not realize that the script and the writing and the characters and the plot is very incredibly average when every 5 minutes you're thrown into just an incredibly cool action sequence. But I can say there wasn't as much Zack Snyder isms in this film as I personally wanted. I can tell you confidently that this movie has a small fraction of the slow motion that his version of Justice League had. And that sucks for me personally, because I wanted more of that. I wanted more of the super slow motion, snow and ash falling, rain falling, close-ups. I know I'm probably in the minority in that regard, but I just wanted more of it, and this film had not that much of it in comparison to most of his other movies. But unfortunately, here's when I get into a con again, right after talking about a pro, but when it comes to the technical visuals, the visual effects, the CGI, a lot of it was really bad. Not Star Wars 1 episode bad, but again, a lot of the CGI, a lot of the visual effects looked like they were from a movie from 2008. There's a scene with tentacles where tentacles wrap around a character, and they looked so bad that they legit looked blurry. A lot of times in this movie, you see characters standing, and in the background, you see space and you see planets all around them, and the space and the planets behind them looked like painting on wood from a high school production. But then there were other times where the visuals looked phenomenal. It was just very, very inconsistent. And the pacing in this movie can be really weird at times, and my biggest critique with this movie is we don't get enough time getting to know all these new characters that are being introduced to us, even though they seem like they have the potential to be really, really, really cool characters. Like, one moment we're introduced to this new character, and like immediately after we meet them, they're thrown into this situation where they're trying to tame a beast. And that scene was supposed to have a lot of stakes for all of the characters involved, but it happens so quickly that we don't really feel the stakes. It doesn't really feel like they're really there. And the character himself wasn't set up enough beforehand for us to really care about that sequence. And then right after that, we meet an even new character who looks even cooler and has like these really cool red laser swords. And right after we meet that character, they're battling this half-human, half-spider hybrid, and it was a really, really cool action sequence, and I really loved the design of those characters, and again, the direction was on point. It was technically very fun to watch. But just like the scene before that, it was supposed to have stakes, and it was supposed to have impactful emotional stakes for that new character that was just introduced. But again, with that character, they didn't give us enough time to care about them. They didn't set up that sequence enough for it to, again, really have any impact on the narrative. And by the end of the film, you have this whole team of characters that technically, on paper, are really unique and really cool and have a lot of potential, but by the time the credits rolled, we didn't know anything about them. We didn't know enough to really care about them. But I found myself forgiving this for the most part when I remembered that this is only part one of a two-part film, and those two parts themselves only serve as the beginning of what is supposed to be a huge franchise in the future. And this film basically serves as a 2-hour-long recruitment scene. You know, in films where there's like a team of characters working together, whether it be like the Suicide Squad or the Guardians of the Galaxy or even Zack Snyder's Army of the Dead, something like that. In movies like that, there's always a montage or a short sequence in that film where we get to know each individual character, and then they're recruited or inducted into the team, and then that's where the plot in the movie and the story actually begins. That's basically what the entirety of this movie is. And hopefully after we see part 2 and further future installments, if those happen, those will make this movie better in retrospect when we return to it after getting to know these characters more. But I'm going to be honest with you, I was really, really, really looking forward to Rebel Moon. I absolutely love franchises and world building. I am not personally suffering from multiverse fatigue. Now, don't get me wrong, I don't think everything needs to be a franchise. I'm incredibly happy that the Batman, for example, is going to exist within its own universe and not be part of the bigger DCU under James Gunn. All of my favorite films of all time are standalone movies, and I would be furious if sequels were announced to those movies. So don't get me wrong, I love standalone movies. But I also love franchises and I love huge worlds, and I was so ready to just embrace this new Zack Snyder sci-fi epic. I was so excited to do so, and I still am. But by the time the credits rolled, I feel a bit of hesitation. I see red flags around. Anyway, I know I just critiqued the hell out of this movie, but I want to make it clear I did enjoy it at the end of the day. I liked it more than I disliked it, and I'm still looking forward to part 2. I'm just incredibly nervous because Netflix and Zack Snyder clearly have a lot of faith in this franchise. It's not an established IP, and they already greenlit a second one. There's tons of merchandise for it. There's graphic novels. There's a novelization coming out. Netflix clearly wants this to be a hit, and this first installment, even though I liked it, wasn't as good as it should have been. But I do have faith that the second one is going to make this first one stronger, and I am looking forward to the future of this franchise. It does have a lot of potential. Like I said, the characters have a lot of potential, and I do genuinely believe that in the next installment and any future ones after that, these characters will be fleshed out in the way that I wish they were here. But anyway, have you watched Rebel Moon yet? If you have, let me know what you thought about it in the comments, and what are you hoping happens in the sequel. Once again, consider subscribing, and thank you for watching, especially if you watched this far.